A presentation of the Lancaster Housing Production Plan 2024 to 2029. The Affordable Housing Trust is sponsoring this effort. The Affordable Housing Production Plan is a requirement of Massachusetts General Law 40B, and it's several uses. One is very useful for a tool for the town of Lancaster to achieve safe harbors. It is a document that is intended to give a snapshot of where we are in terms of our state of housing and where we've been and where we want to be. It's a tool, it's a strategy tool as well as a statutorily mandated tool for, as I said, Chapter 40B. We have our consultant, or members of the Affordable Housing Trust, Chair Victoria Petrarca.
Hi everyone, I just wanted to clarify that this is actually not a meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust, so we will not be voting or deliberating this evening, but we're here to participate in the forum. I just wanted to make that clear. It's not a posted meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust. And are we recording?
Yes, yes, we are recording. Yes, we are recording. And it's being televised as well.
Great. I knew it was being televised, I just wanted to make sure it was being recorded.
This will be available for streaming as well.
Great.
Trust member Carolyn
Reed.
Carolyn Reed. A trust member
Deborah Williams.
Deborah Williams. Okay. And our consultants.
And Kelly Dolan is actually on.
Oh, Kelly Dolan is online. Yes. Okay.
She's a trustee.
Excellent.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Kelly. And we have our consultant, Nelson. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. How many folks are online? Just curious. I don't know how many participants we got.
Kelly,
Four?
Marilyn,
Four
Liz,
folks?
Rob Ziadek, yeah.
Okay.
Six, yeah.
Well, welcome everyone. I think it should be a good group for a discussion around housing production. So my name is Niles Nelson. I am a principal at Community Scale. We're a firm that focuses on housing and zoning. We work a lot in Massachusetts, but also across the country. And we're thrilled to be working with the town of Lancaster on this project. And on this team, we also have Jeff Levine, who can introduce himself.
Yeah, so I'm Jeff Levine of Levine Planning Strategies. I do planning consulting in New England mostly. And I also teach urban planning at MIT and a couple other places. But my focus is really on the strategies. Once all the data is there, so what do you do with it? I've worked in the past as a city planning director, both in Massachusetts and Maine. So the thing for me that's really important and that I find interesting is what do you do with this information? How do you action it to get things done?
Great, so we jump into it?
Go right ahead.
We brought Jeff in at a good point because we have completed the data assessment and now we're starting to think about what to do with it. So what I'm going to do is very quickly walk through the data results and then with that be able to talk about some high-level strategies. And I want to spend most of the time today on that discussion. So, yeah, you're fine.
Want me to sit over here instead?
Go for it, yeah. I think it might be better.
Yeah, I think so.
Don't have to twist around quite as much. So Brian already gave us a little bit of an introduction as to what is a housing production plan, which is very helpful.
Thank you.
Lancaster adopted the last plan in 2019. This plan that we're planning on submitting in November will be good for the years of 2024 to 2029. And based upon the last plan in 2019, there's been a lot of change. A lot of things have been enacted as a result of that. And so we're definitely, in terms of creating strategies, building upon what's already happened. So a lot of things that we typically would have suggested, like making an affordable housing trust, starting inclusionary zoning, starting CPA, doing a 40R, ADUs, that's all happened already. So congratulations to Lancaster for doing a good job. And so now, 5 years later, we can see kind of where the trends are, where we've been heading, and if there's any adjustments that need to be made or other things looking forward. So we talked about what is a housing plan. There's a lot of terms. If something's confusing, we can stop and talk about an acronym. I already mentioned some of the great things that have happened already. So this is maybe a place to pause for a second in terms of thinking about how the policies of the last 5 years have been enacted. So on the right-hand side here, there's bar charts that have 3 different bars. One is the expected household growth per income segment in the next 5 years. One is your currently cost-burdened households. And the final one in yellow is the kind of business-as-usual pipeline of units that you are expected to have based upon your growth rate for the last, or since 2010, which is about 60 units a year. So what this is showing is that if we think about households as being in one of 6 groups in terms of their median household income, and so that's by percentages, the median being 100%. The lowest is less than 30%. There's a lot of cost burden there, but there's not a lot of, or any household growth on net. Looking ahead 5 years, that's not going to be a growing part of the population in Lancaster. There's also no new housing plan for that segment, but as is shown here, is a pretty significant portion of the households in Lancaster that are experiencing cost burden.
Nels, could I just interject? I think it would be good to explain what cost burden is,
Yeah.
so folks understand that.
Yeah, cost burden is a household that's spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs, whether they are paying rent or paying mortgage. If it's more than 30% of their household income, then they're cost burdened. If it's more than 50%, they're severely cost burdened, but this is just counting everyone who's over 30% for the purpose of this. So then if we bump up to 30 to 60, there's actually quite a significant level of growth here. It's one of the fastest growing segments of households in Lancaster. It's also experienced a lot of cost burden, but right now it's not the target of a lot of programs or subsidies. The only housing that's being produced new at that income segment is 8% through 40R, and the 40R project is tentative as to whether that's going to happen or not in the next 5 years. But that's where that subsidy is coming. And if we go up to 60 to 80, this is a segment of the population that is targeted by 40B and by inclusionary zoning. And so with those 2 programs, which Lancaster has adopted, there is housing production at that level, which is commensurate with the level of cost burden and the household growth. And then if we move up the chain, we start getting into market rate housing. And this is where most new units are being delivered. It's like a new car. It's going to be more expensive because it's new. And there's also household growth in those income segments. So that's setting the stage. We're going to dive into a lot of those details a little bit closer. So this might be a little bit hard to see, but this breaks down the AMIs. So that's the median income levels by what that household income range is and how much they're able to pay for housing at the upper end. So 100% here in Lancaster is $147,000, and that equates to a monthly housing cost of up to $3,700. And then everything else is just fractions of that. This is how we think about household growth as what we call a layer cake of different AMIs. So this is what we use to create a forecast for what the different incomes are going to be in 5 years. We think this is a really, really helpful tool. So the way that this works is we look back to 2010 and we adjust the income brackets at that time for inflation, because if you didn't do that, it would just look like everyone was getting richer all the time. And then we carry that forward to examine the trends, and then on top of that layer what the expected growth rate is, proportional to how your income tranches have been growing. So household growth isn't just the number of new households that are coming into Lancaster, although that is a big part of it here. If we try to convert from households into housing units, we need to add a couple other factors. One factor is replacement housing. So housing ages out and you build new ones, and that happens at a certain rate. That's about 8 units over 5 years. Right now, vacancy in Lancaster is very low. If we think about these gauges being kind of like the safety dials for a healthy housing market, you're doing really well in overcrowding. You don't have any substandard housing. Other places where we work, those dials are much higher. So you have a good housing stock, people aren't feeling overcrowded, but your vacancy rate at 2.4% for all units is extremely low. And so in order to get up to 5%, we think that Lancaster should build an additional 77 units. And so if you take the expected growth with the replacement housing, with the vacancy adjustment, you get up to 295 housing units over the next 5 years.
And Nils, that's total, that's not breaking down for affordable.
That's total, yeah. Yeah. So another couple of ways of thinking about the population in Lancaster. One of the ways is about age. So doing the same type of approach where we look backwards and then carry those trends forwards. There's going to be a lot more seniors in Lancaster if business as usual continues. So that's that dark blue line that's continuing is the 65 plus tranche. And then one of the things that we like to do is think about how many older adults might want to downsize. So this isn't in addition to the other demand, but it's a way of thinking about demand. And so older adults actually typically move less often than younger people. They move at a rate of about 5% rather than 16%. And then only about 20% of those people want to move into a new unit. And based upon that, we can estimate how many downsizing seniors might want new units in Lancaster over the next 5 years, which is 35. So not a huge number, but definitely something to be aware of. I can skip through some of these demographic slides. This is showing the difference between 2015 and 2022. There's more married couples, there's fewer single parents, there's more single person households, there's more seniors living alone, there's slightly more adults living with parents. That might be a reflection of the higher housing costs. Yeah, sure. Yep.
So in terms of demographic trends, I noticed, so you said the fastest growing segment, of course, is the 65 plus.
Yep.
We're seeing a downward trend of children.
That's right, yeah.
The other growing segment is was it 20 to 34? So if that trend, as that trend is growing, is there a correlation between that age cohort and an increase in the number of children, since they're beginning, that's the prime childbearing years or for couples or whatever?
Potentially. I think looking at this and just carrying your trends forward, it's not clear to me that the 20 to 34 range is really growing. It looks pretty flat historically.
The one that was growing.
The purple one is pretty flat. I guess it does tick up at the end, but the 0 to 19 is slightly downwards. So there are.
Lost connection.
Oh.
I don't know why.
It's weird because they're still online.
Yeah. But yeah, there are more married couples with children, or there have been in the last 7 years.
Recording in progress.
So if that trend continues, then you could have more children.
We apologize, folks. We lost connection momentarily. It looks like it has resumed. So just following up on that now, then. So, can you, strategically or historically, if these, just say the 0 to 19 and the younger cohort continues to decline and the older cohort continues to increase, what does that look like in out years? Is there any type of description or any type of, Are there any existing situations where this has played out to a, not catastrophic effects, but to some effect? Is there any description of that, or is there any, how does this play out?
Any thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, generally, people who have been born in, particularly in the Northeast, are having fewer children. So the wild card, for want of a better term, is people who might move to a place who might have more children. But generally, the trend is, even if there's equal or more 20 to 34-year-olds than there used to be, they tend to have fewer children than they had 20 or 30 years ago. And that seems to be continuing to decline. Now, that could change. But that's the trend that I've seen, and what tends to drive up number of school-age kids and school enrollment and things like that are often people coming in either from other parts of the country or often from other parts of the world. And I haven't seen a ton of that in Lancaster, at least in the last few years.
But if housing prices and median incomes, that gap continues to grow.
Yeah, well, that would tend, I mean, that might bring in migrants that are wealthier. But again, wealthier people tend to have fewer children. So I don't see anything that's driving. Yeah, I don't see anything that's driving increase that might reverse that 0 to 19 trend. It might level off. It's not going down as fast as I've seen in other towns.
Yeah.
Some of them are really going down.
And I have questions, but I'll wait to the end.
Okay, yeah, let me just run through this. So this is showing cost burden for renters and owners, and the scale of the chart is the same, so you can also see the relationship between the number of renters and owners at each AMI level and in total. And no one's surprised that there's more cost burden at the lower incomes. This is your current mix of structure by tenure, so how many people are owning, renting, or how many units are vacant by type. And again, vacancy is really small, which is a concerning fact for Lancaster. We can look at how many bedrooms are in these units. And a lot of this is just assessing the stock of the housing that we have today.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Vacancy, just because I know the housing market in Lancaster really well.
Yeah.
What are you using to qualify the vacancy number? Are we including like the empty Atlantic Union College campus? What's vacant?
Just vacant residential units, not commercial property. So I don't think that would qualify.
I would love a map of where those vacancies are because I can fill every one of them.
And they're usually, I mean, especially when it's this small, it's usually temporary vacancy. Because I assume this comes from ACS.
Yeah,
and that can include not just seasonal homes or homes that aren't rented out right now or sold, but also just someone's happened to be renovating their home on April 1st, and the sort of census came and they said, is this occupied? No, it's not. It's being renovated. So you have to dig a little deeper, but with a number this low, you don't really. It's just really low.
Well, I'm in real estate, so to me, knowing the market, I just found what qualifies as vacancy because, again, I could probably put a body in every one of those vacancies.
But these 72 are probably not vacant anymore.
Okay, so this was back from, you said April?
Well, it's whenever it's an ongoing survey, the American Community Survey, so it's whenever the survey shows up at your house. But it might be that it shows up at your house while you're renovating your house.
Gotcha.
If you're honest, you'll say, yeah, it's vacant right now. With a number this low, that's a lot of them, honestly.
Okay, no, I just wanted what the quantitative factor was.
If it was 300, then you'd want a map of them.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Thank you, I apologize.
You're fine. Second homes and seasonal homes also count as vacant.
Right.
But if you take all the seasonal homes, second homes, actual vacant units, you should be at least 5% for a healthy market. We can look at when housing was built, and a lot of it was built quite a long time ago. So we also looked at housing costs. So home sales prices are going up in Lancaster, like a lot of other places. And looking at this chart, it's not just that home prices are going up, it's also that interest rates are going up. And even though you do have higher income people in Lancaster, the housing is increasingly unaffordable because of those increasing housing prices and the increasing interest rates, which has really been accelerated after COVID. So this is showing the gap between the median home price and the median price that would be affordable at the median income. Rent prices are also going up. And again, now we're going to walk through a little bit of the understanding of what happens at different levels of income. So this is where we've already shared a version of this, where the cost burden is at different levels of income. This is your racial diversity at different levels of income. This is the number of households by household type at different levels of income. So you can see that it is pretty evenly distributed between families with children, families without children, and non-families, which could be singles. We can also look at the income segments by age of the householder. So this is showing that you have older households, a lot of older households, so that's the lightest bar, from 30 to 60% median income. So if we think about some of the other just bigger trends in terms of creating new housing, the general preferences right now are for smaller units, and that's more of a reflection of just the changing demographics, smaller households than we had in the past, combined with a prevalence of stock of larger households. So the 3 and 4 bedrooms that make up a lot of suburban mix. Potential for roommates. People are interested in green building and interested in multi-generational housing. If we think about your housing the essential workforce, here, in Lancaster, we think that is the 60 to 120 income range.
Could you just define essential workforce for folks?
Sure. So these are the folks who we celebrated during the pandemic, but it's the people who make Lancaster work, and they show up to work in person. So first responders, teachers, municipal employees, tradespeople, food producers. A lot of places are losing this type of household as they get priced out. And so you could think about policies that would support the 60 to 120 range, or make sure that it's possible to build housing. So typical trends we see in essential workforce housing is trying to find a cost that is affordable to them. So here that would be $2,200 to $4,400 a month. So a big range, 60 to 120, and near job centers. And then we can also think about what types of things you would want for housing older adults. Okay, so the other part of our scope was to look at where are development constraints and opportunities in Lancaster. So you have some projects in your pipeline that we're going to go into more detail on, and there are a couple of opportunities that have been identified, and together these 3 opportunities offer space for several hundred additional units, so that could fill capacity for a decade. In terms of the active projects, you had one project that was at some point recently added to the subsidized housing inventory, Cottage Lane.
Cottage Lane is now on our SHI, yes, and it's almost completely built.
Great. So we're counting that towards the SHI, which I'll get to in a second, but it will be coming online during these 5 years.
It's pretty much online.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So the other projects that are in the pipeline are Laurel Hill Estates, 23 ownership, 2 affordable units, Main Street, which will have 1 affordable unit, Neck Farm, which is 11 affordable units, and then in your 40R district, there's been an ongoing kind of tentative project which would result in 146 units, all of which would be on the SHI, but 25% affordable at a mix between 80 and 60% AMI. So if we look at, one of the big objectives of this plan is to think about trying to achieve safe harbor, so getting to that 10%. back in 2019, when the plan was adopted, you were at 5.4%. With the units added from Cottage Lane, now you're at 170 units, so in 2024. And we look out to 2030, because in 2030, the new census will be released, and that will be the new denominator upon which the 10% is assessed. So we have to also think about how many total households will there be in 2030, and then divide the number of affordable units by that in order to get to over 10% ideally. And so currently, with the projects I just shared, that's a total of 14 units going on the SHI, so you would still be 160 units short.
So that's without the landing.
Exactly, yeah. And so then if we add in the landing, you would be short 14 units. Yeah. So I kind of kept the landing off a little bit separate because it's kind of a question mark, but, or maybe you can fill in about that.
Well, it's in litigation between the two landowners right now. So if that's resolved, then, and it's resolved at NEPA, then it should go forward.
Okay.
I mean, we don't have a crystal ball.
Well, if the landing were to move forward, you would still be 14 units short of 10%, but that's a lot of progress made.
But that's for 2030.
Yes, for 2030.
Right.
Yeah, which is when the new denominator will come out. So in 2029, I guess you could be in safe harbor, and then you would get a new denominator. So the other places where there are potential projects are at the Atlantic Union College. This could have, if it had the type of density that would be under MBTA communities, which is 15 units per acre, it could be 400 units there. South Lancaster Village is something that we'll talk about a little bit more. This could be a new walkable district that replaces some of the auto-oriented uses that are down there, including some vacant buildings. And that could be 70 to 120 units. And then at DCAM, there has been a study, which I think one of the scenarios was 194 units. So a pretty good chunk of additional projects. Here's another detail of this one. So one of the ideas here is to rezone for 40R or rezone in another way for mixed use, mixed income development. In South Lancaster, there's these 9 parcels which have kind of a mix of lower value uses, and so you could seed the redevelopment of this by thinking about rezoning it to have smaller units. That's also one of the things that came out of the community survey as part of the last comprehensive plan update, is that there was the two things that the public wanted were the flexibility to make smaller units, but then also to preserve the neighborhood character. And so by rezoning a place like South Lancaster Village, you're not impacting neighborhood character, and you would also create the opportunity for smaller units, therefore fulfilling the comprehensive plan. And here's the DCAM property, and one of the concepts that was for 194 units. In addition to that, one of the opportunities is to look at town-owned property. So by going through an RFP process to sell town-owned property for development, you can also specify what type of housing you would want to see there, and that typically comes attached with a reduced land sale price. So if we think about some of the goals that are or aren't being met, such as housing for special needs populations like seniors, disabled, lower incomes, you could try to achieve some of those things in a place like on town-owned land. So we took a first pass at looking at where development might be able to occur on town-owned land that wasn't conservation land, that is reasonably close to activity centers, so you're not creating more car dependency. And these Kilbourne road parcels are one opportunity, and there's about 4 acres that would be developable there with some constraints. There's currently some access constraints, so you'd have to work on a new frontage road, but this is one opportunity. So zooming out a little bit to talk about the goals, this is something that we covered with the Affordable Housing Trust that we shared at the last public meeting. And so the first one is to achieve and maintain safe harbor indefinitely. The second goal is to reduce cost burden. The third one is to provide housing at lower levels of AMI. And I made a note here that specifically that group that is 30 to 60% AMI could use some love, because it's a growing group, and right now there's not a lot of subsidies targeting them. Provide housing for special needs populations, so I mentioned the 35 units for seniors. And then in the last plan, there was a target for 20 units for persons with disabilities. And speaking with some of the stakeholders, that is something that has not been fulfilled. There's still a big need and a very low rate of housing for people with disabilities in Lancaster. And then also to do all this using environmentally sustainable methods. So that can be things like reducing vehicle traffic by putting housing in places that are served by amenities. So I mentioned the housing survey already. And now we're going to jump over to talking about some strategies. So this is a kind of a matrix of 5 strategies, how they relate to the 5 goals, and I'll bring this up again at the end as we're having the discussion. Jeff, you want to talk about the first one?
Sure. So you have an inclusionary zoning ordinance, that's great. That's often one of the first things we look at. It's probably worth looking a little bit at what it's producing with respect to the needs that have been identified, and maybe looking at that deeper level of affordability. When you do that, you do need to remember that a deeper level of affordability means more of an internal subsidy, so you might have to adjust the percentage of units you require, or offer a choice of more units at a higher level of income, or slightly fewer at a lower level of income. So you can't squeeze blood from a stone. It has to come from somewhere. The goal is it comes internally from the development. But the worst case scenario is you make the development not feasible, and then you don't get either the market rate units nor the affordable units. So just something to keep in mind, but I think there are a lot of communities that have lowered that number to 60% and maybe lowered the percentage they require at the same time, just being realistic. But saying we'd rather get fewer units at 60 than more units at 80 or 100. So that's an important one to take a look at. We don't have a final, like you should definitely do it this way. That would take a little more analysis, but that's an initial thought, again, because of the needs that they identified.
What about the number of the 6 to 9 is 1 unit?
So yeah, I don't think, there's a lot of levers you can pull. I think the threshold is probably okay. You could look at changing the threshold, but you don't necessarily have to if you look at lowering the number of units. The other thing you can do, though, I've seen this in some communities. When I worked in one community where they required it down to, I think, 5 units, but the requirement was for fewer and less affordable, higher levels of income and fewer numbers of units until you got to, say, 10. The idea being, as you get bigger, you are more and more capable of actually producing more affordable units. So it essentially made a higher requirement at a higher number of units. It starts to get a little complicated then, and sometimes it's not worth it. But I don't think your threshold's a bad one.
Does that make the assumption that it's only for-profit developers?
So usually if it's a not-for-profit developer, they're usually producing a certain number of affordable units anyways. I usually recommend exempting any subsidized housing developer, because otherwise it starts to get complicated with, anybody who's producing units with low-income housing tax credits or with home funds or other sources of subsidy are going to have to meet affordability requirements that will be higher than the inclusionary anyways. So it's simplest just to exempt them.
A question about your 60% AMI. You seem to be segregating the 60% AMI from senior housing, but isn't a large segment of the 60% AMI seniors?
Oh yeah, it is. It's not necessarily segregated. Any household that met this requirement would be eligible for these units.
But in your aims, you seem to be treating them separately.
I mean, they're identified as separate, but I don't, for example, for this recommendation, they would be considered anyone at that income level, so we can clarify that. A lot of seniors, although they're not working, are making more money than you might think through investments or whatever else. A lot aren't, and the ones that aren't should be eligible for
And
these.
Social Security.
Right, yeah. Should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, any other questions about that one? No? Okay, so, yeah, the next one, this is something that we just spoke about a second ago, is thinking about rezoning South Lancaster. This is also in the comprehensive plan, so not a new idea, but something definitely that we want to be repeated in this housing production plan, I think, to be a mixed-use walkable district. And I think that could be a good location for more efficient housing, more units per acre, smaller.
So is this, just to clarify the geography, is this like from the college down to the bridge?
So it's kind of hard to see, but in the teal outlines there, I don't. Yeah, so here you have the railroad bridge kind of cuts across here. So you're really close to the town border. And then you have
All those businesses
the businesses, yeah.
currently open and working?
Some of them are closed.
There's 3 vacant buildings there, everything else is functional. 4.
Yeah. So I would presume that the non-functioning buildings would change first. And one of the things that you can do is specify ground floor commercial. So if you're concerned about losing the commercial activity there, saying that the first floor has to be a commercial use, and then above that can be housing, or the parcel has to have a mix.
Well, I'm just a really realist, and 2 of those buildings abut the railroad track, which is why they're vacant right now, because there's no parking. So unless we're gonna put parking garages underground, just saying,
We need to solve the parking.
the parking's gonna be, I mean, regardless of what we do with the overlays and the setbacks and rezoning and blah, 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 the railroad company owns into part of those lots as an easement. No, I'm talking about Dave Newbold's 2 buildings directly abutting the railroad track, which is those 2 tracks that have vacant buildings on them. Unless you literally put parking garages underground, you will never have sustainable parking for more than 2 units.
Well, don't forget, it's walkable village too, so it's,
They can't walk under the railroad bridge as it is. I'm just being honest, trust me. I'm all for affordable housing, but let's be realistic.
Maybe that corner is tricky, but I do think that it's possible to have
Oh,
some
where the
zoning
old companies
changes
is?
to-
Absolutely.
I mean, I think if you're looking at things to say form-based zoning, okay, so you're incentivizing, it's a form of incentive for some of these property owners who have these small unit buildings set way back, to either somehow, now they can increase the value of their property if they're allowed to move up, move to the front line, property line, and build up, so that they're not only renting commercial space on the floor, on the residential.
These are the 2 buildings I'm referencing that are currently vacant, and I know the property owner. Yes, even if they move to within the 3 inches, like the Neck Road project, of a road or a sidewalk, you're still gonna have limited parking in the back, even if you go up.
Okay, right.
So I'm being a total realist. If you take this lot where the old Cumberland Farms is, absolutely feasible, but there'd still be a parking constraint. These are all active businesses, in business and producing money and paying taxes. So really, your only spot to build is 1, 2, 3. I could rezone it until I'm blue in the face and blood is shooting out of my eyes. You're not putting 15 units there. I'd love to, don't get me wrong, but the railroad has easements.
It's multifamily though, I mean.
No, I know,
In those lots that are, those 3 lots, even if it's just the 3 lots.
Put 10 units, put 8 units there, I mean, that I could see, but, I mean, the number thrown out was over 10. I'm just being a realist. I want to see affordable housing and hit the levels, but I ain't living on those railroad tracks, even if I was dead broke and destitute. The parking's just gonna be an issue.
Proposals come in.
Yeah, I mean, the parking's gonna be an issue, and I don't see the temperature in Lancaster, because it was discussed in the 40R for underground parking.
I don't see there
Like,
being,
I can hear the heads popping already throughout town.
I don't see there being able to be underground parking here, but I do think there might be the economics for a deck as part of a building, where it's not a standalone deck, but as part of a 3 or 4 story building. I've seen it happen in similar locations.
I'd maybe take a walk down there and really check it out and check into the easements that the railroad company has into those lots, because that's one of the problems the property owner's having with reestablishing those as active businesses, is he's constrained not only by our zoning restrictions, which is a legitimate issue, which is why I support personally doing some rezoning in this area to make it more flexible so we can do more with that. But he runs into issues with the railroad and their easements. We can't control that. I mean, it's a very active railroad track.
Okay.
So I'll shut up now, thank you, sorry. I just, like, my eyeballs popped out of my head. Victoria like knew I was gonna say something.
Those are great concerns that we should take a look at, so thank you. So jump back ahead. So those were the two that we had in terms of regulatory strategies. The rest are other types of local programs that are non-regulatory. And you wanna...
Sure, yeah. I mean, first off, it was great to see that you already have an affordable housing trust established. It's really, again, one of those things that we often recommend. I think the next step is to look at how to capitalize funds that you can actually utilize to help produce housing. So there's a few different sources that are possible. One, you know, if you have inclusionary zoning now, I didn't see a fee in lieu option, but I presume you have one.
We have a payment in lieu.
Yeah, so that's certainly one option. Other ways the communities fund affordable housing trusts. If they sell surplus property, they sometimes put a certain percentage of it into their affordable housing trust. I've seen communities that have a formula where at the end of the fiscal year, if they have free cash, they put a certain percentage of those unencumbered fund balances into their housing trust. Not all of it, because they're not going to put all of it in. They're going to put some in a rainy day fund. They're going to put some into capital needs. That makes sense. But some percentage of it. Looking at other sources and just sort of beating the drum of any time there's available funding. Wouldn't it be great if some of it went into the housing trust? And then developing policies for using it as a layer of financing, not by itself, because you're only going to produce 1 or 2 units then every few years. But if you use it to help make a project that's using other forms of funding feasible, you can really leverage it. So I've seen, you know, it's roughly 15 to 25,000 units of housing trust money. Can really go a long way with developers that are looking at other sources as well.
And we have CPA funds.
Yep, so certainly that helps. The CPA funds are a little less flexible than housing trusts because you can kind of do whatever you want with your local funding, but yeah, that's certainly one source.
Can CPA funds be transferred, like without a specific project, just to have at the ready, so that when something
I
comes
believe you
up-
can. Again, if you start collecting money that's more flexible, you do need to sort of segregate them. But you can almost have 2 affordable housing trusts that are under one umbrella and say, okay, this amount came from the CPA, so it has a few more restrictions. These are unrestricted. We can use them for anything that our local bylaws let us use it for. But yeah, you definitely can do that.
But you can transfer, under the CPA umbrella.
It doesn't have to be
You can do
project-based.
it doesn't have to be project-based, but can you transfer it without having a specific initiative, so you have it in your own account?
Yes, but that's what.
I believe you can, yes.
It still has to go to town meeting, yeah.
Yeah, right, yes.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be tied.
So that's another great source if you're interested. It's not quite as flexible, but it's a good source. I mean, it's, you know, to some extent, it's just a question of being opportunistic at any time there's funding available. But free cash is a nice one if you can convince the town to adopt a free cash policy, which is what I've worked with in other communities. And that way it becomes just rote, that every year when there's free cash, 25% of it goes into the housing trust or whatever. Because there's always a little bit of free cash at the end of the year.
The developer comes in town with a subdivision, you know, the Affordable Housing Trust has built up some cash, they can say, hey, can we incentivize you to get some deeper
Right.
subsidized units in your development?
Right. Or if you have a certain type of housing you want to produce, a developer comes in, has certain sources of financing, but you say, hey, we're really looking for this income level that you don't have funding for, but if you add 4 units to your project and we can share all your common costs, like your construction costs, can we give you money from the housing trust to do 4 or 5 units of the type we want to see? So you already have the infrastructure, which is most of the battle. I just encourage you to start putting money into it.
Is that the last line?
Yeah, if there's no other questions about that, we already talked about Kilbourne Road. Like I said, that was one of the options, but I can imagine doing a more thorough look at the town-owned properties, see if there's anything else that could be disposed of for housing. And then the last one is just keep your eyes on Atlantic Union College and the DCAM property. I know that you've already influenced DCAM to have housing as part of the program, and making sure that continues to be the case and is also the case at Atlantic Union College, I think, is the final important strategy.
So we could solve all of our problems there, but
Yeah.
it's private property.
Yep.
I think one thing, expansion of public utilities is one of the big things.
Oh, yeah.
It's limited, so I think, you go further down Main Street or different directions, but, sewer, water.
Well, and I guess maybe that's my follow-up question, and I'm definitely not the expert, but just knowing on the other fronts that I look at, have those potential challenges been applied to South Lancaster? Because we do have water constraints. Like our wells, not meaning literal wells, but our water sources are already very stressed. We have water issues in Lancaster. We have sewer credit issues in Lancaster. So if you want to add 5, 50, 75 units to the South Lancaster district and make it whatever you're proposing, are you looking at those potential resource constraints? Because we can only pull from nowhere, honestly, down there. As much as we'd love to wave a magic wand and say, oh, here's X amount of sewer credits, fantastic. I don't know enough about how that mechanism works, but that's definitely a concern I'm on the planning board also. It's a concern when we look at stuff on planning board, how is it going to constrain water, sewer credits if we're trying to tie into, town sewer versus a private sewer, so on. It's always a concern in North Lancaster. We're always trying to find ways to bring town water in North Lancaster. It's just...
Well, there's investments, hopefully, again, we submitted the Lancaster Sewer District submitted a grant, hopefully we can get something from that.
That'd be fantastic.
But so a lot of the dearth of sewer credits are directly related to what they call the inflow and infiltration repairs that need to be made.
Right.
And right now, they're also under a consent order from the Mass, so but that can be changed, that can be negotiated. So right now, we need to clear up 2 gallons of I&I to get 1 gallon of sewer credit.
Right.
But those between negotiating with the state, showing that the LSD is making a good faith effort and some money to invest, some grant funds to invest, or some capital investment to actually do the work, you can free up, I know that there's some debate around the numbers of what will actually be freed up, but you can do something.
Well, if anybody's going to find it, it's going to be this housing trust. They're very good at what they do, and I have total faith. Those are just, I hear the echoes already resonating, and Victoria knows where I'm coming from in that. I'm a full supporter of fixing and getting us into safe harbor. I just, unfortunately, we can't check all the boxes with no protest. There's always going to be protest in Lancaster.
Yes, well.
I had a question. There's a project on Hilltop Road for 18 houses. There's a subdivision there. And I think that under inclusionary zoning, they'll have to provide...
Recording in progress.
Again, apologize for the disconnection. We are back online.
So under inclusionary zoning, that project will include 2 affordable units. But in your defense, we haven't talked about it before, so
This hasn't come before a public
I
hearing.
didn't expect it to be in your presentation because it's in the nascent stages. But I'm wondering in the interest of our housing production plan, if we shouldn't add that in, and we can give you the details on it. But it's 18 total units, of which 2 must be affordable. It's not like, it's basically just keeping us, you know, flat. It's not like a big boon to affordable housing, but it's not going to push us back either.
Just gotta be careful, the public hearing on that hasn't opened yet, so we don't wanna see.
Yeah, that opens August 12th.
On August
But
12th.
I mean, it's been submitted for 18 units in the pipeline. I would put it in,
Okay.
I mean, the plans have been submitted.
The plans have been submitted, right, but just the public hearing hasn't been opened, so.
But I mean, we're talking about like AUC and
Yeah.
things that don't even have plans.
No, that's what, yeah, and
This is
the
a-
developer is fully, yeah, he knows about the inclusionary zoning.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the books as a requirement, so I would just, in trying to be as thorough as possible, I would include it, 18 units, of which 2 have to be affordable, or else they can do that payment in lieu, because it's an ownership project. And then, what's the project with the duplexes on White Pond Road? Is that 4?
No, that doesn't trigger any inclusionary zoning.
No, I know it doesn't trigger inclusionary, but it's, what is it? It's 4?
Oh, it's for two,
It's just 2
home
duplexes.
ownership. Yes, it's a flex development, but it's a flexible development. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that zoning bylaw, but it's to trigger open space, to protect open space as
Yeah.
opposed to
Right.
affordable housing.
I mean, it's market rate, but I don't know if they need that in the pipeline of like future units. Or are you just using a formula how did you derive that 30, what was your new denominator in 2030?
Yeah, that's looking at the addition of 60 units a year, about 60 units a year, which has been your rate of growth.
Okay, so you don't really need the project on White Pond Road that doesn't have any.
Well, did White Pond Road ever get back whether they're doing ownership or rental? Because I knew that was last up in the
That
air.
was continued to.
Okay. So maybe we'll figure that, I think that's one thing that's in the air.
Yeah,
We don't know if they're selling them or if they're renting them.
But it's not germane because you use a formula to extrapolate the future unit. So that one, don't worry about it. Okay, I just wanted to bring up those two known projects that we
Great.
have going on. I don't think, am I missing any other residential projects besides White Pond Road and Hilltop?
We don't have anything before influence yet, I don't think. Am I forgetting something? No, White Pond Road.
Can't think of anything.
We've already-
DCAM was really my heavy hitter.
Yes,
I'm
and I
hoping
think
we
as
get
soon
DCAM,
as soon as we get something from the state, things are gonna start moving.
Is there anything else that should be in this plan about DCAM specifically?
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet.
I know when the town administrator did her presentation on ideas, she had 3 very good ideas that were very housing heavy, which was nice.
We don't have a number.
We don't.
I think you might be able to get more units than their concept plan, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Well, I
the
think there
concept
was-
plan is nice, but I think you could get more units than that.
Well, that's why it's called a concept plan.
No, I know. But this is where, I mean, and, you know, depending on how you feel about that, that may be something that we could push a little bit in this plan and say, you might be able to get more than 194 units, which I think you could. Just looking quickly at the site.
Deb and Carolyn from the Housing Trust. And Kelly, you're online. Do you have feedback this evening for community scale?
I don't.
Deb
I
does
wish I
not.
did.
Is there anything from the housing bond bill that you would incorporate, or things that might, as the housing bond bill passes, hopefully at the end of the month, that would give us other opportunities? Because there are some points in there about using surplus properties from the state, and there are about improving public sewer, public water.
Right, right.
And so there are some possible funds there. So is there some other ideas that we can include, assuming that that will pass
Yeah.
and utilize some of those
I
funds?
mean, my thought is to highlight the needs in this plan as specifically as possible so that whatever comes out of the bond, they're always looking for what a local community said they want. So maybe we should be a little more explicit about emphasizing the capacity constraints potentially in sewer. But also, I mean, the DCAM site, that's the type of site they might put housing bond money into to get 300 units instead of 194, you know?
Is there some way we could use Commonwealth Builder funds here, or
Right,
anything, the mass housing funds, to
right, yeah,
help us expand density and meet the goals of the bond bill, so we'd be
right.
assured that
Right.
there's funding?
Yeah, and I think that we're sort of we're trying to guess what's in the housing bond bill, but it's starting to get a little clearer, I think, hopefully.
Yeah, I feel like the central structure is the same.
Yeah.
The amendments are in and out.
Right.
The central structure
Right,
is.
yeah. But the clearer you are in your local bills in the housing production plan, the more likely you are to get money from the housing bond bill, as well, unless there's a specific earmark, but, yeah.
Little Lancaster earmarks in there, right, housing authority.
Not that we've heard of. Nothing's come our way.
But yeah, I mean, certainly identifying your needs and the sites you're interested in, that sets a vision forth that's compelling, and then they're looking to, I mean, it sounds silly, but they want to spend, they're often looking for, where can we spend this money?
Right.
And the default will be in places like Boston, where they're like, give us all the money you want and we'll spend it. But if you identify sites or needs, they'll say, hey, we'd love to spend some money in places like Lancaster too. And also, it's less money than they'd be spending in Boston, so.
Yeah. And there were amendments particular to rural housing.
Right. They have the Rural Development Fund.
Yep.
And that's actually, we've applied for our sewer repairs through the Rural Development Fund.
Okay, good.
Kelly Dolan?
I have no questions, thank you, Victoria.
There's a program, and I was just looking to see if I could find it right now, but I don't have it on the tips of my fingers, but Kelly, do you recall, there was a program that you and I were talking about recently with Jen Gordon for first time, I think it was home buyers of, what was that, like first generation home buyers? Remember the
Yes.
name? What was the name of that?
Yeah, Person Home Program for Massachusetts Affordable Housing Alliance.
I'm just thinking, Kelly, to keep that in our brains, we should probably put that in the housing production plan. Are you familiar with that, Nels? No?
I mean, I know of it, I don't
You
know
know
that
of it?
much about it, but it seems like a good
It's
source.
a resource.
Yeah.
In CPA money, and, it doesn't have to be, again, just for the housing trust consideration, first-time home buyer program or, rental assistance type of programs are an option. It doesn't have to be sticks and nails,
Right.
Yeah, we can also do first,
But this is a program through the Massachusetts Affordable Housing Alliance, MAHA. And do you know about this program? So it's the first generation home program. I think it should get some airtime. I'm just trying to put everything in one place while we're doing this.
That's a good point.
And we're in the Metro West CD consortium.
Okay.
I don't want that to fall off the wagon. We should definitely have that in there, that there are resources through that, as Lancaster's we just renewed our membership in that.
The home consortium.
The Home Consortium?
Kelly, I see your note. I know you have to go to the select board meeting. Thank you for coming.
I actually didn't know that you were in the Metro West Home Consortium. It's good, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, we're in the Assabet Regional.
Oh, okay,
It's
okay.
it's called ARC or something like that.
Okay, the Assabet one, okay.
We're in the Assabet one
Yeah.
with Hudson and
Okay,
Stowe and Bolton, and there are like 8 of us, 8 towns in that.
yep, okay.
And there are resources through that as
Yeah.
well. Just trying to get it all in there
Yep.
before we go to press. I had a comment about the stakeholder interviews. So I thought it was really great that Nels met with stakeholders, but I don't know a lot about the outcome of that. And so I was wondering if we could beef up that section, because I think it's really important that we understand what the Council on Aging said, or if you,
Yeah.
I think you met with the Council on Aging, as one of them.
Yeah.
I'd really like to know what they said about affordable housing and the other stakeholders that you met with. And maybe there's a way to incorporate more robust feedback in the document, so we can work together instead of just we're over here in the Housing Trust, and they're over there at the Council on Aging, and
Yep.
the Commission on Disabilities is over there. But if we can stitch all of our conversations together as we're thinking about what kind of housing to build.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so I'll fold in the couple stakeholder interview results that I had.
Awesome.
There was also a couple of people who didn't respond, but sometimes people like to come back and put in some input after you have something to share.
Sure.
And so we can do another round of outreach.
Yeah.
Make sure that we get a couple more stakeholders.
And what about we have a new Veterans Affairs?
Yeah, I reached out to that person and didn't get a response. That could be another one where
Okay.
I bothered them.
I can give him a gentle
Yep.
nudge. He's great, he's a great guy. So I know he'll get back in touch with you if I talk to him.
Jeff, so I know there's, and talk about small towns such as Lancaster tend to do is start throwing zoning bylaws into the mix. And I mean, do you think it's, is it recommended that, okay, you do inclusionary zoning, you do an ADU, you do, a flexible development, you have iPod, these kind of mixed-use incentives, 40R, or do you focus on one or two zoning, rezoning, or zoning bylaws that are more effective or could be more effective? There's always that question. Everyone likes to throw, let's do an inclusionary zoning, but then it becomes too complicated for developers coming in town deciding how they want to do this. If you could pick 3 innovative ordinances or bylaws that produces affordable housing, this increases the number of housing, the amount of housing in by, affordable housing by correlation, or what are your 3 favorites?
Sure. For a community like this, I can easily think of 2. I can probably think of a bunch of possible third ones. One is looking at these focused areas and doing the upzoning that we're talking about.
You mean talking like a form-based zone, or
just whatever you can do to get that scale that makes it feasible to do.
density zone?
You're going to, because for example, if you're going to resolve the parking issue in South Lancaster, you're going to have to allow density. That's
Right.
how it's going to work, because otherwise they won't be able to afford to provide the parking. So finding those focused areas like these sites identified in the plan and really upzoning them. I think that allowing for things like accessory dwelling units or second units with very few restrictions. A lot of communities are willing to do ADUs, but then they add a lot of restrictions to them and they wonder why they don't get any.
Right.
And the reason is it's very hard to finance them, it's very hard to build them. And then if you also have a bunch of requirements like, an owner has to live in the primary building, or you have to take it out when you move.
Yes.
So the easier you can make it to make it sort of simple, that this is almost a second unit other than how it's designed, where it feels accessory.
Did you have any feeling whether it's, should they be detached units?
I think it's fine if they're detached, if they're designed to be secondary. I think the biggest challenge with ADUs is these other restrictions that are put on them.
Yeah.
And ideally,
Because we literally just went through this, and right to my left is Carolyn, who's kind of spearheaded this effort to lighten up our ADU
Yeah.
requirements, and we just did it and it passed at town meeting.
oh, good. So there you go. So you've already done that one. And if they're not light enough, do it again.
Right.
But, what we've heard over and over again from people who have to finance and build them is we can do it, but not with all these restrictions communities put on them.
Right.
Cut out all that red tape.
So, and then in terms of a third one, just looking at things like, even smaller single-family lot sizes. Everyone thinks planners hate single-family homes. I actually like single-family homes. I think they're often on lots that are way too large for them.
Right.
But as small as is feasible in areas that don't have water and sewer, you might need, 15,000 square feet to make it work, although the technology is getting better. And areas that can tap into water and sewer, 5,000 square foot lots are great.
Yeah.
But again, it's not an
Again, it needs to be in a focused area.
Yeah.
There's plenty of 5,000, maybe 10,000 square foot lots that are legally non-conforming.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
They're existing and they're fine, and no one has a problem with them, but just try and propose new ones.
Right, exactly. So I love looking at smaller lot sizes, even
Yeah.
if you're gonna keep the single family zoning. So those, I guess if I had to pick a third
Or
one.
multifamily by right.
So there you go. But either way, just looking at your lot sizes, because often that's an artificial restriction. Things like zoning changes are one of the few ways you can essentially finance more housing for free. You can relax your zoning, you can sell surplus property below market. Anything else pretty much costs money. So, yeah, I guess those would be my three.
No, great, that's really helpful.
And then at the same time, you know, areas that are environmentally sensitive or that you want to preserve, farmlands you want to preserve, a lot of times places say allow housing there, but allow large lot housing. That's almost the worst of both worlds. If you're not going to allow housing and want it to stay agricultural, just keep it agricultural and say, but we're upzoning the other parts of the town instead.
Well, let me, do you agree with the statement that Massachusetts has given municipalities a lot of good tools, diverse tools to balance growth and open space protections?
Yeah, I do think so, yeah. And I think having worked in local government for a long time, I know the hard part is getting them through town meeting, or I know that.
So, I mean, but I like to, so it's a public education to say, you know, there's always the fear of the public or people when they see new developments, they want to just say no because they're afraid that this is a slippery slope and you're going to have high rises covering all over all our open spaces. I just like to let people know that this is not the intention.
Yeah.
You know, people in government and people who affordable housing advocates or housing advocates in general are not interested in filling up our open spaces and our environmental sensitive areas. You know, but there are smart growth, you know, is what we use a term. There are ways to achieve our housing goals, house our families in more affordable ways, and look out to the future without building all over our open spaces. And I think that's where the battle is at town meeting. People are coming in, they have these preconceived notions that we're going to just destroy everything that they know and love. And I'd like to just take these chances to say, no, it's not the case.
Can we put that on a big banner, all 16 of them around town, I'll happily pay for them.
Yeah, you know,
It'll be my in-kind donation.
Very well said. And the only thing I'd add to that is people feel like once you loosen up zoning, suddenly it's going to instantly happen.
Right.
And things take time, so if you don't like what's coming out of your zoning in a year or two, you can still change it again.
Yeah.
So the stakes are lower than people often think.
Right.
I have another question. I want to make sure that we let anybody who's in the room get a chance to speak. I don't know, staff, Susan, I don't know your first name, I'm so sorry.
Peter.
Peter, would you like to speak? We're here if there's any discussion or comments or...
No, this is my introduction. In Lancaster, I live part-time here. I'm one of the vacant houses, I think. And I spend the rest of my time on Long Island, where we're 100,000 rental units short of where we should be. So it's a different world down there, but a lot of the same issues and same problems and same fears. So, as well as sanitary, water, and other issues. That's a sole source aquifer there, so, you know, a lot of the same issues, but magnified by the fact that there are, 3 million people who live in Nassau and Suffolk County.
We appreciate your interest in this topic and being here. Everyone, actually, thank you. And is there anyone online?
Yes, there is.
I see Marilyn, I see Rob's. Actually, Rob's hand is up.
Yep. So, Rob, if you want to unmute yourself and go ahead.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Rob.
Okay, I'm Rob Zadig, 103 Geneva Road, speaking as a private citizen. I'm feeling, and I hope you're feeling, excited about these attractive opportunities to make us an even better community through the development of affordable housing that soon become welcoming homes for our future friends and neighbors. As some of you may be aware, I am an avid, active supporter of our Commonwealth's and our nation's environmental justice policy. In that role, I like to consider myself, and I heartily encourage everyone, even for just a moment, to consider themselves an advocate for our future neighbors, who very likely will become beneficiaries of our EJ policy. As you may also know, I can talk a lot. To break that tradition, I present tonight just a few bullet points about the EJ policy and conclude with an offer I believe will improve our success at achieving these opportunities. Point one, EJ policy only has two tenets. One, there must be early and continuous involvement of all EJ communities in all decisions of all developments that could adversely affect them. And two, the adverse effects from the construction and operation of a development cannot disproportionately, and underline that word, affect the EJ community when compared to those effects on the EJ communities. Point 2, the term environmental justice refers to the living environment of EJ community residents. Yes, the effects on what we typically consider the environment, air quality, sounds, light, water quality, traffic safety, personal security, recreation facilities, etc., are indeed important in judging compliance with policy, but it's the involvement of and the effects on the people, our neighbors' living environment, that becomes the ultimate determinant. 3, a look at any number of environmental impact reports submitted to and processed by MEPA will reveal how ultra important the EJ portions of these reports have become. Before my concluding recommendation, I offer that I have a whole lot of supporting information and studies. I would welcome an opportunity to discuss with others individually or as a group. I only ask that it starts, proceeds, and ends as a positive, respectful, and friendly conversation. I recommend that we reconsider our reliance on MEPA rather than ourselves as the designated judges of EJ compliance and developments in our town. I believe that this approach is too reactionary, meaning it could be quite costly if the time consumed and the nature of MEPA's assessment do not go our way. The best way to mitigate that risk is for us, meaning the boards and committees represented tonight and all of the residents, to proactively make our own objective, thorough, and cooperative assessment as to how a development will likely fare in an EJ assessment. We could then work from the very beginning design stages with the developer to fortify the EJ strengths and shore up the potential weaknesses. I promise this will be brief, so I thank you very much and sincerely hope I've helped add to the optimism of our housing productions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. So, environmental justice, Lancaster is an EJ community.
Okay.
So it's just something, if you want to weave that into the
Yeah.
building production plans.
It's mostly minority, right? It's not a, it's the,
Yeah, it's based on the minority
what are the
population.
three colors? Purple is the two of them,
Low income minority and language spoken at home.
and the combination,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so,
The
yeah.
combination of the two
Yes.
is I don't think we have any purple areas.
Yeah, that didn't, yeah, we'll add that to the
But,
commentary.
environmental justice, is being more and more woven into every policy, especially at the state
We
level.
have two clusters. The South Lancaster has an EJ cluster, and it's low income and minority. And North Lancaster shows a cluster on the EJ map for the Commonwealth, but it's tied to the prison.
Yep, okay. Great,
And
thanks,
it's
Rob.
the same too for the prison, low income and minority. So it's slightly different because it's actually, it's a reflection of the prison.
It's
then
forced
as-
residency.
Yeah.
And that's small lot zoning.
Is there anyone else on Zoom that wanted to speak this evening? Before we,
Marilyn Riley here.
hi
Can you
Marilyn.
hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm on the Housing Authority and the CPA committee, and I just want to thank everybody for this work. This is very important work, and there's a lot of challenges ahead, and I look forward to partnering with you to get some real low-income housing in this Lancaster.
Thank you so much,
That was
Marilyn.
my guess.
Yes.
Thank you.
We're very excited to get some truly affordable as well. One thing I wanted to mention, just in terms of outreach and communicating with our residents, one of the reasons we selected you for this RFP was that, one of the reasons, there are many reasons, but one of the reasons was that you discussed a website that you offer to help inform residents about the work that's going on as it's going on. And I think that's another great way to reach folks that can't always be here right now. They might be working, they might have constraints with kids or whatever. I really liked that in your proposal. And I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned it tonight, that maybe within the next, I don't know, like 6 weeks or so, we could get something up online that has this presentation, and as I know it's an evolving document, but something that folks could review at their own pace.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We'd love to do that.
Awesome.
We like to put out like a simple website for a lot of projects like this that has interactive charts, and it's just easier to view on your phone. That's the main benefit.
But it's really meaty and it's really interesting. Like each one of those slides, I mean, you could just spend a long time looking at it. So if we could get that up for people to see, that would be fantastic. And with that link, maybe we could have the link on the Housing Trust webpage, but also maybe on the main page of the town to make it even easier. You just go to the main page of the town and click, and then there it is.
Yep, we'll put that together. So yeah, that is a good segue to next steps. So following this conversation, we're going to continue revising the plan document. The next scheduled presentation is to the Planning Board and Select Board on September 16th.
Yep.
And then submission to EOHLC by November 15th. So that's what we have looking ahead of us. So yeah, we look forward to being in touch with staff and the Affordable Housing Trust to review the next drafts. We'll probably need a couple rounds of revision before we're good to go to Planning Board and Council.
We have a meeting in August, so I'll make sure that we get any other feedback to you after that.
Okay.
So that you have that before you go to the Planning Board and Select Board.
Right. Yeah, the Planning Board and Select Board hearing is to adopt the plan.
Yep.
Which is a requirement.
That'll be a joint presentation?
Yeah. When's your meeting in August?
It's August 1st, isn't it? Right on the 1st.
I think so. It's the first, I'm just looking at my calendar. It's the first Thursday in August.
It's not today.
Yeah, it's August 1st.
Okay.
So that gives you plenty of time for any edits or tweaks.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. No, there's plenty of time. I'm thinking of whether we can give you a revised copy before then. So we can go from August 1st to the 16th as efficiently as possible. Because you've kind of already had a chance to review this version, so if there's other changes we need to make before then, we can keep on moving.
Great.
Okay.
I thought it was really good.
Yeah.
So I did think it was really good. I just wanted to give you that feedback. Like there are little things here and there, like, projects that, this new project on Hilltop Road that we mentioned tonight, or there's some stuff, like little things along the way. But overall, I thought it was really good. I liked that you captured our stated goals at the Housing Trust from when you came to see us. That was nice to see that what we said made its way in. It doesn't always happen.
It's planning.
It's nice to be listened to. But overall, I thought it was really good for a draft.
Great. And congratulations to Lancaster for all the great work you've been doing.
Yeah, it's always fun and challenging to work in communities that are already doing a lot. Because this is all the
doing
easy
a lot, but
stuff.
we're not in safe harbor. That's the hard part.
No, right. Well, you can't control everything. I mean,
yeah, it's hard. It's a miracle. I say sometimes I feel like it's a miracle that we get anything done. So many constraints, and it's really hard. It's just really hard.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, and feel free to reach out if something comes up. If you have another idea for a strategy, we can include it.
Sounds good. Okay, great.
So again, to people online, any questions of this, you can feel free to reach out to me, Brian Keating, at the Department of Planning and Community Development. I'm on the website, on the Planning Board side, and Victoria.
Yeah, sure. Feel free to reach out. I'm on, actually my email. I was going to say I'm on the website for the town, but that hyperlink was apparently disabled.
Okay. Yeah. So you can call me, and I can easily be a conduit between.
I would say if you want to get in touch with me, the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust, send an email directly to Brian and
or
you'll get
Kelly,
it to me.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Or to vpetrakapublic@gmail.com.
All right, thank you. So this concludes our presentation for tonight. And keep an eye out on the website and other communications. And as we progress towards our final housing production plan and more affordable housing and housing in general in town. Thank you very much.